So welcome back to Watch Your Six. As I mentioned in our monologue, we're going to talk a little about emotion. We're going to talk of ways to mitigate some of the anxieties that come from investing in a world that's full of Instagram and social media resources and talking heads and all the buzzwords. And we're going to try to give you some sound advice. We always do that. There are some fundamental things that you can do. And in this episode, we're going to talk a little about what we call the structure. What is the structure to being successful? Is there some key things that you can do over and over that will minimize mistakes? Remember, the premise of Watch Your Six is to try to determine things you are not aware of, things you don't look into. So whether you're sitting there on your phone, with your investment brokerage account, buying and selling positions, whether you're discussing maybe starting a new company, you've had this great idea that you've wanted to do forever, and now you're going to take the initiative and maybe leverage some money and get a loan. Or maybe you're an executive looking to make some decisions, maybe a midlife change, you want to switch careers. There are basic fundamentals that will really help minimize the risk and maximize potential. Now, one of the biggest things we recommend when you have an environment we see today, and what do I mean by environment? Well, if you turn on the TV and you watch a local TV station or a national station, do you ever see any good news? Is there any positive news? Typically, no. Now, if you couple that with financial data, and as we know, the market seems to go up 500 points and drop 500 points daily, that can wear on your emotions and make you somewhat gun shy. Now what happens is your emotions start to override logic. And when it comes to saving money, when it comes to spending money, when it comes to other habits, what happens? Well, they become slanted, right? So we want to try to minimize, you'll hear me say this a lot, minimize the emotional effect on our decisions. One of the best ways to do that, and we've talked about this a lot with our clients, is the first thing we do is write a plan down. Now, it sounds very fundamentally easy, but many people never write down on paper what's their financial objective. Do they want to buy a house? Do they want to put the kids through college? Do they want to expand their business? Do they want to sell a business? Do they want in 10 years to be in a certain place in life? What's funny is they have it in their brain, but they never write it down. Now, why is that so critical? Well, if you write something down and we create a format, it's something that you can go back to years later and reference. And now what it does is helps readjust, puts you back on track. Think about it this way. You're riding down the road and it's middle of the night. You're doing really good. You got your lights on, the road's ahead. Then you turn the lights off. What happens? Well, you're going to turn the lights on real quick, right? Because you want to make sure you're still on the road. Well, that's what a financial plan or an outline does for you when it comes to your planning process, when it comes to the investment decisions. Stay the course and have something that is guided by logic. So when the emotional waves come in, when the anxiety comes in, the friend of yours tell you, hey, buying this great position, I've just popped up, you're going to love it, my buddies own it. You're going to have a logical reference point. That's critical. It's going to keep you on that road. It's going to keep you focused on your objective and your goals. So that's one critical component that you want to have in today's world. Now, another thing to look at are how you invest or what you invest in. There are areas in the market that no matter what the economy does, they are very rarely impacted. We've talked about this before. One great example is high net worth or high-end retail industries. Why? Well, whether we like it or not, the super wealthy already maintain their wealth. So when these economies collect or contract, like we discussed, or have some type of correction, invest in the high net worth markets. High net worth retailers still are insulated. People are still spending money. Those individual entities are typically not impacted that greatly. Another good example is transport entities. Think about railroads. Think about trucking companies. Think about things that have to get things from point A to point B. Regardless of the economy, regardless of the fear, people still need milk, right, in their refrigerators. They still need gas in their cars. Those are areas that are also insulated against market correction. But as I've said before, go back to step one. We don't want to chase the rabbit down the hole. We don't want to say, okay, great, I'm going to invest in all the high retail. I'm going to invest in all the oil companies. That's where all my money is going to be. That wouldn't be a smart plan if it doesn't fit into what you created years ago as far as your future strategy. So looking at entities or companies that have what we call a low correlation to the market. There is another sector that many people don't know about, and it's something that we do with our fairly lucrative clients. It's called the alternative sector. Now, alternative sectors are a unique investment sector for a number of reasons. One, they have a very low correlation to the stock and bond market. What does that mean? That's a fancy word for if the stock market goes down, they typically don't go down that deep. If they go up, they don't go up that deep. So they don't track with the market. Now, when you're looking to prevent market volatility, right, or you're looking to be able to sleep at night worrying that your whole portfolio is going to tank overnight, you want something that's going to act in contrast to the market. Well, the alternative space is a great space. Good example of one alternative space, what they call private equity. Private equity is not public, just like the name says. So those individuals have the ability and flexibility to buy and sell things at a greater speed. So when you have a market correct and the market contracts and things become more affordable, or companies maybe get on the chopping block and they're looking to become insolvent, those private equity companies actually make a lot of money in that environment. Why? Because they can now swoop in, buy decent companies, restabilize them or cannibalize them, but then turn a profit. So that's just one example of multiple alternative spaces that we work with our clients on a regular basis. But those are the unique strategies that you can have out there. And if you inculcate those into your investment strategy, you're now creating a better portfolio that will create less volatility. That means less up and down, and you're going to have the potential to hit your financial goals. You see, again, when you listen to the news and the talking heads, remember, fear sells. That's why you turn into TV, right? That's why you see the clips. That's why they promote these dramatic adjustments. But reality is usually a little bit boring. But I like reality. We want your investments to have reality. We want consistent. We want growth. We want minimal volatility and not a lot of drama. And there are ways to do that. As we just showed, some of the strategies, the investment tools that you use are critical. Now, one of the other great tools is called diversification. You've heard it overused hundreds of times. People talk about diversification. To diverse means to simply split up. That's all. So split up your accounts, and the premise is that all boats don't rise at the same time. So if you have money in one boat and it's going up and the other boat's going down, it helps offset that down, or vice versa. However, diversification is sometimes misunderstood, or due to the lack of knowledge, people don't really understand what they bought. I'll give you a great example. Many people say they want to put some of their money into the international positions, they call it, international or global positions. So they'll go on their 401k, or they'll go on the brokerage account, or they meet with their brokerage advisory team and say, hey, I want to buy some international investments. And or here, buy this global fund. It sounds really good. It's global. It'll get me international. Well, here's the thing you need to know. There is a huge distinction, for example, when you mention international and global. So you may say, well, I bought global funds. I've got some really good funds. They help me get international exposure. But did you realize that most global funds, again, by definition, are global? So they have both international and U.S. portfolios. And again, who is the largest economy on the planet right now? United States. So most global funds are actually made up 70 to 80% of U.S. positions. So you take 15% of your portfolio and you say, I'm going to buy some international. I'm going to put in this global fund. Are you really buying international? No. If you drill down and you got all the information, you've actually just taken 15%, and 80% of that is still in the US market. So is that going to be diversified or diverge from the US economy? No. You've not accomplished your objective. Versus a traditional international fund, by definition, saying international has to exclude the US market. But then you have to go even deeper. So when you mention international, you're talking Pacific Rim? Are you talking the European marketplace? So there are a lot of little moving parts. Now, I don't say this to make you nervous, and I don't say this to say it's just too much to keep up with. Because the problem with that concept is that eventually you just give up and you don't do anything. And then unfortunately, you never hit your dreams, and that's what we're here for. We want you to achieve your dreams. We want to help you get to those financial goals, whether it's the ability to be with the kids more on the weekends, whether it's the ability to travel, maybe give to a philanthropic endeavor. We want to hit those goals. So understand, while we're bringing up some of the technical parts of investing, there are a lot of ways to simplify this. It's not very complex and very hard, but it all comes back to a strategy. And like any good strategy, or we use the analogy blueprint, any good construction, you have to have an outline. Once you have your outline, then we'll slowly build on that. And over time, you're building something that is sustainable, something that achieves your objectives, right? So those are some of the things that we think are critical, and we see that on a regular basis. from individuals that ask us those questions. We've had a lot of good DMs through our podcasts already, and people have really tried to maybe drill down and say, so what do I do start today? Or what do I do starting tomorrow? So again, going back to the compilation of what we just described, first, let's create that plan. Let's put pen to paper and come up with stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. The parts of the stages or steps that you don't know, leave it blank. That's where you get members of your team. You start to maybe work with a financial firm like ours, or you work with an attorney team, and you get those individuals plugged in, and that data becomes part of your plan. But create that plan before you run ahead. A lot of entrepreneurs, and there's a litany of them, started out with great ideas, started out with great concepts, had a level of success, but then ran into all kinds of hurdles that could have been avoided, whether it's the unsustainable growth, whether it's the misdiagnosis, so to speak, of their legal documents and not understanding exactly what kind of agreements they've signed. So now they find themselves in a legal struggle trying to maintain ownership of the company, whether it's the ability for them to build the firm out without becoming over leveraged. I mean, a list of things go on and on. So again, we stress to try to make sure that you take the time first to lay everything out. Once you do that, implementation, and that's critical. Now, one of the biggest things or the fads that we're seeing right now is called FIRE. You may have heard the term FIRE. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So FIRE has become a big trend. There are individuals now that are all trying to use FIRE, and you'll hear that acronym a lot. Now, that acronym just really helps you highlight our goals. In today's world, unlike maybe 20, 30 years ago, with the resources that are out there and the knowledge, for the first time, people can actually be millionaires, and they never thought that was possible. Sounds bizarre, but it is really possible. And on top of that, they can retire early. Now, retiring early, though, when it comes to the term FIRE, means different things to different people. So, for example, a FIRE cash flow might be someone says, listen, I'd like to get to the point where my cash flow is so good that I don't have to work as much. Or another person may say FIRE time early. So, for example, that person says, I want to retire early enough that I can take off 3 days a week, be with the kids, be with the wife. That's what I want to do. So those are all critical components that we feel are things that take planning. There are people that say, FIRE, I like to maybe give away half my resources, my income to other individuals. So when you're thinking about that part of your world, so now we've done some planning, we built a successful business, and now we've gotten to sort of the point where we're thinking about what's my future. Then think about what you're trying to encompass. Now, retirement early or FIRE has become a buzzword with people in their 40s, people in their mid 40s, early 50s, early mid 30s. You're seeing an opportunity and a perspective that never existed before. But those goals will not be achieved unless we take the time and we create a very methodical, detailed approach. Doesn't have to be complex, but it has to be detailed. And then we have to invest in the right strategies. We talked a little bit earlier in the show about some perspectives or sectors that can minimize risk, and that's critical. But in the same breath, we want to make sure that we have an all-encompassing picture. The worst that you want to do is try to retire early and you gear up for your 45-year window. At age 45, you're getting ready to relax and take it easy. And all of a sudden, you miscalculated, and now you go from 45 to 55. Think about the emotional strain that will put on you and your family if you built up the expectation of being there. So with proper planning and proper focus, those objectives are very realistic. One of the biggest things we see now is individuals, going along with this FIRE movement that took off in the early 2000s, is them not understanding what perspective or what's critical to them. What do I mean? Well, you'd be amazed how many times I talk to people and I say, okay, now we've got through all your data. Tell me what your goals are. What's your dream? And 50 to 60% of them will tell me, I don't really know what my goal is. I just get up every day, I go to work. I got to pay my bills. That's it. Well, that's not a goal. That's your daily routine. Your goal can't really just to be get up. Your goal has to be greater and bigger than that, because then that inspires you. And when you have inspiration, you become motivated, and that motivation then turns into some kind of success. So your goal needs to be something, and you can keep it simple. Maybe my goal is to save $100 a week. Maybe my goal is to, get out of work and only have to work 4 days versus 5. Maybe my goal is on the weekend to spend, 2 or 3 more hours with the kids. Those can be small goals. Or maybe my goal is to pay off one credit card. But you have to have goals. Therefore, those goals then can be achievable. And when those goals are achievable, now you start thinking about some of these bigger pictures. And the reality of enjoying life while you can enjoy it becomes something that is sustainable and maintainable. So we're going to be answering more DMs. Again, we'd love you to give us some DMs through our podcast or through our YouTube channel. We'd like to answer those questions on air. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. We have a lot of different questions come in, some on investing, some on tax planning, some on estate planning. That's a big thing right now, and estate planning is a big concern. How do I transfer assets to my kids if something were to happen to me? So in upcoming episodes, we'll be discussing that more. We look forward to you taking advantage of our IG page. Please note those posts and let us know what you think there. And we look forward to seeing you on our YouTube channel very soon. My name is Jason Edwards. Thank you for watching your six, and we'll see you next week.